So it occurred to me the other day that one of the things that I used to collect most when I was growing up was actually comics. And I have, of course, discovered that eBay is a horribly, horribly efficient way to allow you to browse comics from all sorts of different sources. And as a result, I have accumulated over the last few days, weeks, possibly months, quite a random collection of various comics of various flavours, and I thought it was about time that I sort of stopped and gathered them all together and, actually sat and read them at some point. Now, I haven't done the reading bit, but I have done the gathering bit, so I thought I'd just sort of flick through them and show them to you, and you can see what sort of stuff I was getting some examples of. So I started off with this one, which is actually the Buffy comic. I've never read a Buffy comic. I know that they continued the series using comics after it finished. This is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, if you're unfamiliar. Massively popular in the, I'm going to say 90s. And, it had a really sort of big following, lots of spin-off series. So, it'd be interesting to see what the comics sort of do with it. This one actually appears to be quite a sort of an old school one, so I'm not even sure what its frame of reference is, but I'm going to be having a look at that in due course. Now, this one I'm more familiar with. This is an imprint of Marvel that I picked up in the 80s, and it was actually this comic. It was a Spitfire comic, Spitfire and the Troubleshooters, and it's kind of like a sort of budget Iron Man kind of idea, but this is more of a robot that someone is piloting rather than it being a suit of armour as such. But this New Universe imprint was, I think it has had a little revival at some point, not that long ago, I believe, but this is the original version of it, and I think what they were trying to do was basically expand the Marvel Universe with sort of new characters and just sort of inject a bit of expansion into it. I'm not really sure how well that worked out for them, if I'm honest, because there were a few of these titles, but I couldn't say to you with any sort of confidence exactly how many of those titles really sort of got anywhere in terms of sales and future use. But I picked up a couple of these because they were around. They weren't vastly expensive, so it'll be interesting to have another read through of them, and I might even be able to dig out the original issue that I had way back when. And it was one of those strange ones where I actually, for some bizarre reason, picked it up in a tiny newsagent's, which had no reason to be stocking US comics in Britain at all at that point in time, and yet in the mid-80s it was. To this day, I've got no idea why that was the case, but it was. So that's where I came across those first. This one, again, this is why eBay just got me with this one. I just love the idea of Optimus Prime with a British flag behind him for some reason, because it suits his colour scheme absolutely spot on. And it reminded me of when Richard Branson turned up in the Transformers UK comic, fishing, I think it was it Centurion and someone else out of the Thames? Megatron, actually. It could have been Megatron. And then the Seacons intervened and pinched Megatron, and Centurion kind of got left behind, I think. But anyway, so yeah, this just sort of, it was just the sort of sheer graphical image of that appealed to me. So I felt it would be rude not to, basically. So that's why I got that one. Plus it's IDW, who always do very pretty Transformers comics. Now, this next one is an interesting one. Slightly gruesome looking, apologies. Stormwatch, but it's Stormwatch in the DC Comics New 52 era. Now, I am woefully unfamiliar with what they did with the New 52. I know it was a thing, I know it was a sort of reboot, I know they rejigged Batman, Superman and sort of the rest of the universe at that point in time. But as I understand it, what they also did was bring in Wildstorm characters like Stormwatch, so like Apollo here, into the DC universe. And I'm not sure to what extent they stayed in the DC universe. So I'll be interested in if anyone wants to tell me what they did with that as a concept, because it isn't an intriguing one. Because I understand there might be an Authority movie in the offing, which would be great because I loved the Authority. But the Authority was pretty dark. I mean, it was like darker than DC dark. But not just that, it was kind of 2000 AD New Statesman-esque. That's a very obscure reference, but basically the idea that superhumans wouldn't just battle supervillains, but they would also seek to change the status quo because they felt they knew better, basically, which is a pretty terrifying concept if you're a normal. So I'm interested. So I got this because I wanted to do a video on the Authority, if indeed there is going to be a film, because I think they're an interesting team to look at conceptually, because it was probably one of the big major sort of first offshoots in the modern era of a sort of a new imprint that wasn't Marvel, wasn't DC, at least not originally, but it actually sort of set out on its own direction, doing genuinely sort of unusual things in a slightly different way to normal, which is just what kind of piqued my interest in them. So I will come to that when I can find time. Now, some of these are actually Doncaster Toy Fair pickups, I think. This is the Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defence. Now, I don't know if this is a Hellboy thing, but we know that name rings a bell with Hellboy. So I suspect it's kind of in that universe as a concept. But again, I haven't looked at it. But Dark Horse, I love Dark Horse as an imprint as well, because they've done Aliens, Predator, Terminator, Robocop, all that sort of good stuff. And I love those characters from those films. I was massive into my Aliens when I was a teenager, no two ways about it. I loved the comics because they expanded the universe so cleverly. I thought it was really great. Again, another Dark Horse one here called Weird, and possibly Wired. Don't know anything about that one at all, but just another one. I mean, for me, with comics, the combination of art and words is just really, really compelling, I find. It just is. I don't know. I can't, more than that, I can't explain. If you get comics and you understand what I'm saying, basically, more than that, I can't really explain. It's just that extra level of depth and imagination required to sort of move you from one frame to another, Green Arrow, not a character I know masses about, but this, again, was just a sort of random pick-up in amongst other comics, so I got hold of this. And, again, be interesting to learn a little bit more about the character. I haven't watched the TV series. I know there is a TV series, but I haven't got into those. They're not really, I don't know, maybe I'm just the wrong age these days. Now, I've got a group of 4, which are stuck together here, unfortunately, because the sender clearly used a little bit too much tape on them and send them to me, but it's okay. Right. So, Stariors. Now, I had no idea why this was available to me in the UK. We did not know these guys as Stariors. We knew them as Rats, Robot Anti-Terror Squad. There are Tomy Toy tie-in comics, but Marvel did them. Marvel did a lot of this in the 80s, and I'm going to be coming back to this as a thing, because it's really, really interesting. Because what you find is that you get comics like this where all they're given is a few toy designs to play with, and then they've got to sort of craft some sort of universe around these toys and make it sort of believable, both to a sort of, a relatively sophisticated comic reading audience and to kids who want to buy the toys, I suppose. But I think it just gives an opportunity to writers to do something completely novel and not be sort of hamstrung by existing character histories. I think that's what's interesting to me. So, often with these things, I think they just basically said, give us 4 issues of a comic. It's got to feature the designs, the toys. Beyond that, we don't that much care. So that's really handy as a creator, because it means you can do whatever you want to do. Presumably, there are they do get some sort of reference and sort of, like series Bibles as to what they can and can't do. But I do just find it really, really interesting, and I will come back to this on something else. This one I picked up off an eBay store because I was trying to sort of get a discount or something, so you had to buy so many to get a discount. I'd heard it mentioned somewhere that Keanu Reeves was having a hand in creating a comic, and this is that comic. So I'm going to be really interested to see this. I mean, look at the sheer number of weapons on this guy. He's got a mace, he's got a sword, he's got some machine guns, he's got a lot of stuff there. So it's definitely channeling the John Wick sort of flavour of things there, I think. But I thought that should be quite interesting. I like the black and white cover as well. It looks like a fan produced thing, but it is a proper comic. Boom Studio, I think it says it's by. Obviously not sort of mainstream comic creator. Now these we've gotten a bit out of order, but this I picked up. This I thought was quite intriguing because this guy was the captain of the, I get this wrong now, Enterprise B, which was a slightly modified looking Excelsior class Enterprise, which we see at the start of Generations, and that's about the only time we see it in the entire Star Trek pantheon of series. But it did establish what class of ship the Enterprise B was, and strangely, that's a sort of an Enterprise A class of ship. That's the Constitution rather than Excelsior. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there with this particular story of him, but that is the guy who basically, I think everything was coming on Tuesday or Thursday or basically some other day of the week that wasn't the day when they really needed it. So that was the gag at the start of Generations. So I picked up that. Now then, do you remember Batman Beyond? Because I remember Batman Beyond. Batman Beyond for me is associated with one of the first places that I rented when I sort of got my first job going, and I remember it coming on Toonami, and it was the first time it even had Sky Television, so like a satellite dish basically back in the day, and I discovered this wonderful channel called Toonami, which did Samurai Jack and Batman Beyond. And this thing was brilliant because it was like Batman the Animated Series, only in the future, plus with Batman. And now I've discovered that there is quite a long run of Batman Beyond comics. So I picked up this one. I've also picked up a sort of a series that looked quite interesting. That I got quite a good deal on. So again, I haven't looked at any of these yet, but clearly, there are a lot of opportunities to get hold of stuff like this. So if I like this, then I might well be hunting some more of these down in due course. Now again, ancient toy tie-in that I didn't even know existed, but a classic example of a mid-80s random sort of comic for which actually had a cartoon, strangely. So they were going full bore with it. So we have both a comic and a cartoon to promote this line of toys. So this was COPS, the Central Organisation of Police Specialists. So basically a bunch of cybernetically enhanced cops who are up against similarly equipped villains. But yeah, so an interesting premise for this. They're going to find out whether or not he's bulletproof all over, basically. So interesting front cover for it, for a kid's comic. Yeah. So again, this will tie into the sort of Star Wars one to a certain extent, I think, because it's just an interesting concept. Because you've got to remember that in the mid-80s, all they had were comics and cartoons. There was no internet to help advertise these toys. So apart from those mediums, that's basically all they had. So it's interesting to see how they used it. Again, random pickup, Invincible Iron Man, number 1 of some volume of it. Looks like quite a modern one, this one actually. I can't even remember why I picked this one up, apart from the fact that the cover is cool. That may have been a good enough reason. Yes, I don't know. I have no idea quite why I picked that one up, to be honest. But anyway, I may have just been filling out the cart to get a discount or something. Again, I'm not sure. Apart from the fact it's got Hercules. Hercules, I remember from the Transformers UK comic because he had his own strip in there, and he recently appeared in the Thor Love and Thunder, was it? Movie at the end. He was in that very, very briefly. So presumably they are going to introduce him as a Marvel character again, and here of course he's up against Thor, which is sweet. I'm not quite sure what era. I've not heard this Chaos War. I've not heard of that one as a concept, and I'm not quite sure where he came, what era that comes from. But I shall have a look at that new concept. As I said, I've been just going down the proverbial rabbit hole with these stores. So some purchases were targeted, others not so much. Batman, Superman, classic team up job, of course. But again, this is the New 52, and it's the number 1 from the New 52. So I'm interested to see what that looks like and what the sort of slightly revised backstories are in there. And I've no idea what these guys are down the bottom here that they're fighting. But anyway, so yeah, just again, part of my little sort of research in quest into the New 52, as is this one. So New 52 and a sort of 0 issue, strangely, of Batman. So Scott Snyder, I think we're familiar with that name these days. So that's that one. I have read the Court of Owls graphic novels, and I think that's very much this era. We've got Stormwatch here, but again, this is Stormwatch of the New 52. So I know who all of these guys are in the original Stormwatch version of things. So presumably that's Ginny Quantum, that's Hawksmoor, Engineer, Midnighter, Apollo, but I don't know on what basis they end up turning up. It's not the first crossover they had with DC when I think about it, because there was a storyline with them that involved Captain Atom as well. So I wonder if it somehow ties into that, but I don't know, is the short answer. Now this to me looks like Bisley art. I knew him when he did Slain the Horned God in 2000 AD, that sort of era. But I've got all of these. This is just a series of Terminator, because I mentioned before I like the Terminator. And again, this is Dark Horse. That's classic. That's classic Bisley artwork. That if it isn't him, I'd be very surprised. So I don't think I've read this. I do have the odd graphic novel actually of the Terminator, but I don't know that I've read this particular series. So I will find out. Saw this, couldn't help but get that because Transformers the animated movie. We would have been rude not to. 20th anniversary special edition apparently. So in fact, this was issue number 3. That's only part of it. I've got another much older version of this, which is the complete adaptation of Transformers the movie as a comic, but that was from right back in the day. So this one is obviously more like a sort of an IDW redo of it. But it'll be interesting to have a look at that because I'm sure the graphics will be epic. This was quite a nice thing to pick up. I've had the Sandman graphic novels for the longest time. Some of my editions of them are positively ancient, but I've never actually had a single issue of a Sandman comic up until now, which is crazy because I've been reading them for the past 30 years. So it's just interesting just to have to actually just have my hands on an original one as a sort of random pickup was quite nice. Now here's a chap who people remember sort of fondly from Next Generation. Captain Jellicoe. Now, if you're unfamiliar, and don't ask me what the episodes were called, but basically it was a 2-parter. He actually took over command of the Enterprise D for those 2 episodes, and he was completely different to Picard. He was really hard-nosed, didn't tolerate any sort of levity, and confined Riker to his quarters at one point because Riker didn't like his style, but then it ended up having to be totally dependent on Riker for getting the job done. Now here I assume this is going to be him captaining his own ship, an Excelsior class from the looks of it. So this is going to be interesting because a lot of people have said that they would have quite liked him to have his own series in a way, because he would have been a very different counterpoint to someone like Picard in control of a starship. So it's a very famous episode, by the way, where Picard is asked how many lights he can see by a Cardassian interrogator. So it's quite a major episode as they go. But lots of people remember Jellicoe for being a complete antithesis of Picard's captaining style. This one I picked up to fill a gap in my collection, yes? Those of you who know who he is will understand why I just said yes randomly at the end of a sentence. Those who don't will not. Death's Head. Very, very old favourite of mine. Love his character. He's not a hero. He's not an anti-hero. He's just a freelance peacekeeping agent, yes? Not a bounty hunter. Don't call him a bounty hunter. He doesn't like that. But this is actually a very modern version of him. And I got the collected version of this as well as the individual issues just to sort of top it off. And it was nice because the collected version of it actually has one of his very old comics in the back of it, which I didn't know until I got it. But that was quite nice. So that was, he still looks very much like my era of Death's Head. Although when I knew him, he started off with a sort of green-brown coloration when he first appeared in the Transformers UK comics, and they rather cleverly they brought him out in his own little mini comic first, so that Marvel got the ownership of him rather than Hasbro. I think I've got that right way around. Because had he not appeared outside the Transformers strip first, it would have complicated things for them. So I believe that's why they did it like that. Now, speaking of all things Furman and Jeff Senior, which is a seamless segue there, picked up these just to complete my To the Death collection. This is a very modern series of comics released by Furman and Senior working together, as they often have down the ages. And this one in particular I rather like because it's signed by them. So I've got Jeff Senior and Simon Furman's signature on there, which is nice for me. I've never actually met them in real life, but I have been a fan of their various works for the longest time, because I was around long enough to remember Dragon's Claws and obviously Transformers and Death's Head, and they did Zoids as well. Jeff Senior inked Zoids, all sorts of comics as I was growing up, featuring their art and their writing. So really, really nice to have their little signatures on that particular work, which is very much their project. I said there'd be a bit more Batman Beyond. I got this series of Batman Beyond called The White Knight. I think this is the whole series. Now this, I believe, is based quite closely on what the Batman Beyond animated series did. So it'll be quite interesting to see how this does tie in with that. You can see here there's going to be a tie-in with the original Batman as well, because the original Batman is still alive at the time of Batman Beyond, and he does act as a sort of mentor for now it's Terry McGillis, isn't it? Who is Batman Beyond? But obviously the suits are very, very different, but there is still this sort of this tie-in. So it's nice to see that Batman Beyond hasn't sort of faded away, because I think it had a lot going for it, and it was just very, very clever updating of the original Batman animated series. It had a style all its own. So if you've never watched it, do have a look on YouTube for it, because it's cool. I like it. Had some clever crossovers as well. And finally, and very randomly, I've got the Federal Bureau of Physics by Vertigo. Funnily enough, it's probably their first and last example in this particular collection that I've got here. I can't even remember. Did they do V for Vendetta or something as well? That's the other thing that pops into my head when I think of Vertigo for some reason. And that is actually that is my pile of American comics that I wanted to get through and show you this evening. Because I haven't done a video this week, so I thought I ought to do one. Now, I do also have another comics project on the go, but it is very much on the go, and I want to do a completely separate video on that when I've actually done it, because it might take me a while and there may be a point at which I just call time and kind of just do it. But I'm not quite there yet, so I will remain mysterious about that for the time being. And if I do release this in time, I have started to do my sort of auction experiment in earnest now. So I have got stuff up on eBay, and I will leave a little eBay link in the description of this video, just so you can sort of make note of my my eBay, well, not store, but my eBay listings, and then you can sort of see if anything catches your eye over the course of the next few weeks. So that is it for this one. Cheers for now. Do like and subscribe. Bye.